Okay, good vach. Vach, everyone. I have two amazing stories I want to share with you, which both stories are reminiscent of what we read today in the Torah, the splitting of the Red Sea, and how there was an impossible issue, and suddenly there was a salvation out of nowhere. So the first story is about the third Rebbe of Chabad, the Tzemach Tzedek. The second story is about the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Rebbe of Chabad. In the time of the Tzemach Tzedek, there was unfortunately, a very prevalent issue with many married women who couldn't find their husbands, either because of the wars that were going on in that time or other reasons. And the Tzemach Tzedek was consulted very often for two reasons. First of all, he was a foremost Torah scholar of his time. And so if anyone, it's very complicated to find halachic loophole that allows someone who was married to consider that their spouse is deceased or not. And so all the rabbis of his era sought his advice to find out if indeed a woman who was married already would be allowed to marry someone else and could consider that her husband had passed away. So he was consulted for that reason. And more importantly, Tzemach Tzedek had divine inspiration, and he was able to see things that other people couldn't see. And because of this, many people who were not rabbis, the women themselves, would come to the Tzemach Tzedek and to ask for his advice what to do when they were stuck and they didn't know where their spouse was. So this one woman, she was for a long time, she knew where her husband was, and she traveled to the city of Lubavitch to meet the Tzemach Tzedek. But the Tzemach Tzedek, his custom was not to speak to women directly, and so she was there, and she wanted to. David, why turn off your screen? Let me look at you. She was there for a long time, trying to find. Thank you. She was there for a long time, hoping that Tzemach Tzedek would respond to her and hoping he would give her a blessing. And the members of the household of Tzemach Tzedek felt really bad for her. She's there by herself, trying to find her husband, and they hoped that Tzemach Tzedek would finally give her advice and tell her what to do. But meanwhile, they hired her as a cook. She worked in the home of the Tzemach Tzedek as a cook, and the household, the Tzemach Tzedek, was trying to figure out a way to bring her plight before the Tzemach Tzedek to get some advice from him. And so one of the members of the household had this idea. They're going to ask one of the Tzemach Tzedek's grandchildren to present her claim to Tzemach Tzedek. I guess the idea was that the older people should have the wisdom to know that Tzemach Tzedek knows what he's doing. But a younger little child, he would have the temerity and the chutzpah to ask Tzemach Tzedek, hey, what's going on? Maybe the adults should have realized that as well. But this is how the story happened. So they got one of the grandchildren of the Tzemach Tzedek to go into the Tzemach Tzedek and say to the Tzemach Tzedek, hey, what's going on with this woman? It's such a Rahmanas, poor lady. She's here for such a long time. She wants to find her husband. What's going to happen with this lady? So the Tzemach Tzedek said, it sounded like a cruel thing, but it was the opposite. If you knew the language of the Rebbeim, as the members of the household did, they knew exactly what he meant when he said it, although it may not sound that complimentary. He said, let her sit here. So it sounds like he was saying, who cares about her? But let her sit here means it's great that she's here because the salvation is at hand. That's what he's, let her sit here. Salvation, in other words, is at hand, right? So she stayed there, and a little while later, among the people that came to see the Tzemach Tzedek, there was one man who had never been there before. He came to see the Tzemach Tzedek, And as soon as he entered the room of Yechidus, the Cheder Yechidus, the room where the Tzemach Tzedek would meet people to have private audiences with him, as soon as he walked into the room, he immediately fainted. When he came to, he told the Chassidim his story. What was his story? The story was that he was married with children, and he had some kind of nichlas beruach shtus. As the Talmud says, a person does not commit a sin unless a spirit of insanity enters them. So he had such a spirit of craziness, and he decided that he's going to leave his wife and go to a far-off place where there are no Jews. This happened, unfortunately, often. And he went off to some far-off area. Like in Siberia, there were no Jews. At that time, by the Volga River, there were no Jews. And so he traveled there, and he married a non-Jewish woman and became very wealthy. He's working. He's in the marketplace one day, and he decides he's going to go home and to have dinner. And as he leaves the marketplace to go home to have dinner, he sees this elderly man, and this elderly man has a stick in his hand, and he says to him, "Berel, you know you left a wife with children. It's time that you should come back home and give your wife a divorce, a get." And as soon as he said these words, the guy just disappeared. He said, "Berel, you know you have a wife and children. It's time you go back home and give her a divorce." And then he disappears. A few days pass. Again, he's walking in the marketplace. The same Jew, elderly Jew, comes to him and says to him, with a stick, he's a little angry this time. And he said to him, the same thing. "Berel, you left a wife and children. It's time you come back home already and give your wife a divorce." And again, he disappears. So this guy, Berel, realized that this wasn't an accident. This was something, wasn't imagination. It happened more than once. And he was thinking, like, where should I go? Like, if I wanted to go back, it's been such a long time, I wouldn't know how to find my wife to give her this again. So what should he do? And he decided that if he ever sees this guy again, he's going to ask him where he should go. So a short while later, this guy appears to him again. And he picks up his stick and he says to him this, "Berel, go travel already and give your wife a divorce. And if not, ich will dir mit der Stecken the Kopfes zu fletten. I will take this stick and I'm going to crack your head open." That's what he said. So Berel asked the older man, "Where should I go?" So the older man said, "Go travel to Lubavitch." Now Berel, I had never heard of Lubavitch, but he decided he's going to travel to a Jewish village. And probably someone in the village may have heard of this town called Lubavitch. That's what he did. He went to this town, and indeed, someone told him he left his home middle of the night. He just suddenly like disappeared from his non-Jewish wife and children, and he traveled to some Jewish village. And he told him where Lubavitch was. He traveled to Lubavitch, and it took him a while. He traveled from city to city until he finally arrives in Lubavitch. When he comes to Lubavitch, he comes into the room with Tzemach Tzedek. He tells the Chassidim, "I saw your Rebbe, and he was the person I saw in the marketplace. It was the same guy. And that's why I fainted. I mean, I saw the person I saw in the marketplace." So immediately, this woman was called, and she recognized him as her husband, and he gave her a divorce. But after he gave her the divorce, he decided to go visit Tzemach Tzedek again and ask him, "What should I do now?" And the Tzemach Tzedek said that you should become a beggar. I guess as a atonement for what had happened, he needed to endure that test of poverty. I don't know. But that's what he did for the rest of his life. He became a beggar, and the Chassidim, the Tzemach Tzedek, would support him and help him And that's the end of story number one. This story was printed in Kutei Sepurim from Rabbi Perlov, and he heard the story from someone in the family of Yaakov Motel Poltaver, who was a very close chassid of the Rebbe Rav Shab. Second story, the story of the Rebbe Rav Shab. A lot of handwritten manuscripts of chassidus are extant in various places around the world and were never returned to the Rebbes of Chabad. Among them, we all know the books of the Rebbe, which are still in Russia. But this story is about this man who somehow had a book of the Tzemach Tzedek's written discourses. Tzemach Tzedek in his own handwriting wrote discourses. And this guy had a whole book of discourses that Tzemach Tzedek wrote. So the Rebbe Rashab heard about this. He sent a messenger to him and offering him 500 ruble to purchase this book. The guy says no deal. Rabbi Perlov writes in the book, he said, I heard 500, I heard higher numbers as well. The Rebbe Rashab offered more money and more money. Sent another message back to him. The guy himself was very wealthy. He didn't need to sell it to support himself. He said, I don't need it. The Rebbe Rashab sent the message back. My grandfather never sold his writings. So either you're going to sell it to me, or I will summon you to a court case, a Jewish court case with a Beis Din, with a Jewish court, and I will demand that this be returned to me because I am an inheritor of my grandfather's writings. I know for sure he would never sell his writings. So when the guy heard this, he was very frightened. He knew that he couldn't say no. So he agreed to give the Tzemach Tzedek the Rebbe Rashab this the manuscript, and he sent the manuscript back to the Rebbe Rashab, gave the money for the manuscript, and the messenger, when he came to give this gift to Rebbe Rashab, I mean, we can understand what this is like for a Rebbe to receive a handwriting from the Tzemach Tzedek. It's not something that people like us can appreciate what it is. I mean, it's not just, I can imagine Yosef being returned to his father after 22 years. Like that's a kind of a joy that this reminds me of. Like, but when Yaakov hears that his son Yosef is alive, that's the verse Rebbe quoted after the Svarim of the Rebbe were returned to the Rebbe. Anyways, so the Rebbe Rashab is very excited, very happy. And he tells the messenger who brings him this book, he says, now what do you want as a reward? What would you like to receive as a reward? So this man's thinking, you know what? It wasn't that he wasn't so intelligent, it was more like he was caught off guard. What should he ask for? I mean, he could ask for anything. What should he ask for? He was thinking, what should I ask for? So he quickly thought, well, if this writing of the Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek is so valuable, and it's worth 500 ruble, his grandson's writing is probably also valuable. So he says to Rebbe Rashab, maybe you could write for me too. Maybe every week you could write some things for me too, and I could be supported. I could sell it. So Rebbe Rashab said, okay, he agreed. So this man, this messenger who had brought this book to this manuscript of Tzemach Tzedek to the Rebbe Rashab, he walks out of the room with the Rebbe Rashab. He feels like he made such a real bargain. What a great deal! He got to have the writing of the Rebbe Rashab. He's going to sell. He's going to make some money, and he shares with the chassidim over there what the great transaction had just transpired. And the chassidim say to him, "My friend, you're already an elderly man. Why didn't you ask the Rebbe to have a share in the world to come? You could have asked for something much greater than just the writing of the Rebbe Rashab, and to make some money off of it." And the guy's like, "Oh my gosh, you're right. I made such a mistake." and he goes back to Rebbe Rashab, and the Rebbe Rashab greets him, and he says, and he tells the Rebbe Rashab, I made a mistake. I asked you to have this writing, and I didn't know what I was asking, and I'm sorry. Could I please exchange what I asked for something else? So the Rebbe Rashab said, what would you like? He said, I would like to have a share in the world to come. And the Rebbe Rashab responded that he can't grant this for him. That in other words, this was a one-time thing. It was a time of divine grace. He was able to give him a request. He wasn't able to exchange the request for something else. But Rabbi Perlov said the story. He said, I knew this guy. This guy was a wonderful person and certainly had a share in the world to come, and he didn't probably need to have this blessing because certainly he earned this share in the world to come anyways without this additional blessing. But this is what Rabbi Rashab told him. This reminds me of one more story. The Alter Rebbe, when he was imprisoned, he sent messengers to Rav Nachman of Chernobyl to ask for a blessing for him, and the Chassidim who were by Rav Nachman, among other things, Rav Nachman said he knows for sure that Mashiach is coming this year. Okay, Chassidim are happy to hear that. That's nice. So Rav Nachman says, what do you think about what I'm saying? And the Chassidim were like, great, if he comes, fantastic. So he said to them very sharply, fools, if you would just pack your bags, meaning if you just pack your bags, you would have made it happen. If you just would have decided, when you heard this message, I'm telling you, that you have just decided to pack your bags, there would have been a change. Then he said this, the Gemara says there are two possible ways Mashiach can come. Mashiach can come in the time that was sent from creation when he's supposed to come, which is called in the Gemara Be'ita, and its appropriate time. Or Mashiach can come, Achishana, we could speed up Mashiach's coming to come faster. So he said, the time of Achishana, the time to speed up the coming of Mashiach, that is in the hands of each person. Every person can make that happen. Every person has the ability to make that happen. And he's telling them that if you would only have said, if you only said, yes, wow, amazing, Mashiach is coming, they could have made that instead of Alter Rebbe just being released from prison. I forgot to mention one point of the story. He told the Chassidim he could exchange the Alter Rebbe's imprisonment for someone else. In other words, instead of the Alter Rebbe suffering, someone else could suffer. They told the Alter Rebbe what he had said. The Alter Rebbe said to exchange for someone else, he could have done himself. He didn't need Rav Nachman of Chernobyl to do that himself. And unfortunately, the Alter Rebbe's daughter, Rebbetzin Dvoraleya, it's not a story for now, it's a longer story, but she had given up her life in order that her father should able to continue his work. So Alter Rebbe said, I didn't need to ask Rav Nachman in order to exchange my life for someone else's life. I was asking him for a different kind of blessing. But regardless, Rav Nachman's message is a very powerful one about the coming of Mashiach, and that how our faith in coming of Mashiach changes something. And this person who was asked by the Rebbe Rashab this question, what do you want? There's a time of divine grace. He could have done something with that moment. And similarly, at this time, the splitting of the Red Sea with Nachshon and Nadav, where him jumping into the water with pure faith that he would be in Hashem and going forward, that's what caused that moment, the splitting of the Red Sea. And in a similar way, as we're coming now from the Shabbos and reading about the splitting of the Red Sea, entering Parshas Yisrael, the week about giving the Torah, Nachshon went from Egypt heading straight to Mount Sinai. He knew he was to get close to Mount Sinai. God said to go closer. Similar way, we have to think Mashiach is coming. All the signs of the Torah point to our generation being the last generation of the exile, the first generation of the coming of Mashiach. And it's happening. To pack our bags and get ready for real. And just the talking about it and thinking about it and davening for it, that makes it happen. L'chaim, we should see it happen tonight. And go tonight to Eretz Yisrael with all the Yidden young and old, sons and daughters, as Moshe Rabbeinu said, they're young, but they're old, they're sons, they're daughters. Take me a mamish.
Rabbi, question.
Yes, Rabbi Yosef.
Rabbi Berel and I were studying the Chumash portion where the Jews come to the Yam Suf, and Hashem says, and Moshe cries out to Hashem, like, what should one do? So, the question is, how come Moshe Rabbeinu's was always in tune with Hashem's messages to Bnei Israel, or to Hashem's Ratzon, to put it more clearly? So Rashi says Moshe Rabbeinu was also praying, and Hashem says, Matitzak Elai, tell the Bnei Israel to travel. So the question is, again, to repeat it, how come Moshe Rabbeinu's understanding was not in tune with the divine will to go through the Yam Suf? And he was also praying.
You're saying that Moshe Rabbeinu was part of the four groups, and he decided to daven and not go into the Yam Suf.
It seems that's what Rashi. Yes, I did imply that. Yeah, and Rashi says he was also praying, and yes.
So
it's not a criticism of Moshe Rabbeinu. It's just like I'm wondering. Moshe Rabbeinu was in tune with the divine will. So if there was the divine will to Yisrael, how come he wasn't? How come he didn't order that? So that's my question.
It's a big subject, but let's say two things. Number one, only when Hashem said to travel forward was that the time to travel forward. Before Hashem said to travel forward, it wasn't the time yet. When Hashem said go forward, that's when they're supposed to go forward. The problem with the four groups was that even after Hashem said to travel forward, only one person went forward, only Nachshon went forward.
Okay.
The reason why Moshe Rabbeinu himself didn't go forward is that's because the Moshe Rabbeinu, his mission in the world is to be a transparent communicator of Hashem's words to us. Flying Hashem's words is something that we're meant to do. Moshe Rabbeinu is meant to tell us to travel forward, and we're supposed to travel forward. Moshe Rabbeinu he wasn't in the state of the challenge at all, of what we should do. He wasn't supposed to travel forward. He was supposed to tell us to travel forward. That had to come from us. And this is really a very important point you're mentioning, because about the coming of Mashiach, there are tzaddikim, but the goal of creation is achieved by a Jew who's not a tzaddik. I had one more word about this. You mentioned this. It's a long story. I shared it, I think, 2 years ago. About
Rabbi, before you mention, no, Rabbi, you have to hear this, because I don't want the audience to miss this. I really apologize to interrupt. I wanted to share with the audience. I said Matitza Kalai. When it's about when the Rebbe between 1950 and 1951, he was kind of holding back on holding the Nesius, and he wanted to accept the leadership. There was a chassid that spanned 3 generations, the Rebbe Rashab, the Frierdiker Rebbe, and our Rebbe. And, when the Rebbe wanted to tell the people know that it's Hashem's Ratzon, that he should be the Gadol Nasi Hador, he told that chassid, tell everybody what the Rebbe Rashab, what the dream you had with the Frierdiker Rebbe. So the person's chassid said, I saw the Frierdiker Rebbe and yourself in a dream, and the Frierdiker Rebbe tells you...
Yosef. The story, I know the story you're saying, it's not exactly how it happened.
What was that? Matisak Elai. Why?
That didn't ask him to announce the dream.
Let's get to Rabbi Levin.
Okay, go ahead. Well, I was interested. I wanted to be Zoiche, to share, but go ahead, Rabbi Levin, correct me.
Okay. Just to go to one subject at a time. Before we get to the subject of what you're referring to, just going back for a second, there's a story in Hayom Yom today talking about a teaching of the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid and the Alter Rebbe, and how the Tzemach Tzedek, they all share the same teaching on this Shabbos, the Parshas B'Shalach. So there's a long story. I'm not going to share the whole story now. I shared, if you want, I can send to you if you ask me after the shir, about this teaching, how it developed. There's one point of this teaching which I wanted to share was this: the splitting of the Reed Sea. The Baal Shem Tov said is connected to a pasuk, to a line. The Jewish people do the will of Hashem, not the word of Hashem. What does it mean they do the will of Hashem, not the words of Hashem? So the Mizrach Maggid gave a parable. He said there's a father, there's a son, and the father's teaching his son Torah, and his son challenges his father. And although the son is contradicting his father, saying the opposite of his father, but the father has unique satisfaction from his son's challenge to him, because that shows the brilliance and the attention of his son, that he is trying to understand what his father is saying. In a similar way, the Mizrach Maggid said, when a Jew, there's a one way of connecting to Hashem by doing his words. So Hashem says this to us to do. Like a tzaddik follows the will of Hashem, and he deserves a seat to split for him. Like a Pinchas ben Yair, who said, let the Ginai River split and the water splits. That's one way of connecting to Hashem. Another way of connecting to Hashem is by going against Hashem's will, by transgressing the will of Hashem and doing tshuva. Like the child who goes against the will of his father, and after going against the will of his father, he does tshuva, and he because he does tshuva, because he returns to Hashem after this distance, that creates a time of divine grace and mercy. And Hashem listens to him, and he splits the sea for him because of his doing the will of Hashem, not the words of Hashem. He went against Hashem's words, but he did the will of Hashem because he did tshuva. He transformed his mistake into something positive. And the Alter Rebbe added another thing. The Alter Rebbe said that, I'm oversimplifying it, but this is the point, that a Jew and Hashem are connected not only because a Jew is a tzaddik and does the will of Hashem or the words of Hashem, but a Jew and Hashem are connected, and therefore just because a Jew is trying to do a mitzvah, that itself is enough for the seat to split before him, that Hashem to allow the natural means that his desire should be fulfilled. Like the Gemara says, a good thought, Hashem connects to an action. So just the fact that a Jew has a desire to do a mitzvah, Hashem already causes events in nature to happen so that this mitzvah should be fulfilled. Like in the story of Pinchas ben Yair, the water splits for him, the water split for a Jew who was carrying flour to make matzah. Just trying to do a mitzvah, that's enough. Even though you're not outside, you're not a loshim, just trying to do the right thing, that's enough. And the Rebbe said that the Alter Rebbe said this teaching because the path of chassidus Chabad is about making the Torah mitzvahs more accessible and closer and easier for us. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe said that Jew deserves a seat to split even without being about tshuva, without being a tzad. On that note, the second point you mentioned, Yosef, about the Rebbe's leadership. During the year that the Rebbe refused to accept the leadership of the Jewish people of Chabad, there was a chassid, I think his last name was Wolf, Rabbi Wolf, if I remember correctly. I know he has, there's a Rabbi Wolf in Chicago, I think it was his father. So he had a dream. The Rebbe was always saying throughout the year that this has something to do with the previous Rebbe, and it's not. He didn't appoint the Rebbe to become the Rebbe. Something to that effect. So this chassid had a dream, and the dream was that he saw the Rebbe and his father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, and the previous Rebbe told the Rebbe, "Ma titzak elai," the words that Yosef, you were quoting before, that Moshe Rabbeinu was told by Hashem, "Why are you crying out to me?" Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, "Speak to the Jewish people; they should travel forward." Those are the words Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu. Speak to the Jewish people and should travel forward. So the previous Rebbe said to the Rebbe in the dream, "Ma titzak elai." Why are you calling out to me, to the previous Rebbe? Daber al bnei Yisrael, say chassidus, share teachings of chassidus, v'yiso, and travel forward towards Bias HaMashiach, travel forward to bring Mashiach. Matitzak elai. Why are you throwing everything over to me that I should take care of this? You, Daber al bnei Yisrael, you should say chassidus to the Jewish people, and this is what's going to bring the Jewish people to split the Reed Sea, to bring Mashiach. So that's an after. So this chassid shared this with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe, I don't know the exact reaction. I don't remember the exact reaction, but it was something very, very confirming. This dream was something that was meaningful. That wasn't just an empty dream. I think Rebbe said something about that. That this dream was a point is that just like then, that was a pivotal moment, and the Rebbe accepted leadership of the Jewish people, and the Rebbe did say chassidus. The Jewish people did travel forward into the era of Mashiach, but now we're not just needed to be in the era of Mashiach, in the actual coming of Mashiach. And Darbam Yisrael, we need to say the words of chassidus, words of chassidus of our Rebbe, and the sharing words of chassidus itself, and learning and talking about Mashiach and believing in Mashiach. That should cause the Vayisrael should travel forward and takasi coming Mashiach tonight. L'chaim, l'chaim, v'bracha. Good vach, good vach, good vach.
Good vach, thank you.
Good vach, good vach. Although I need to make a bracha.